chat option and send your questions there. You will be attended on the chat. So everybody, welcome to the first coffee break of the Permanent Forum of Binational Waters. We are very excited. We have a lot of people joining in, and we are getting more people as we speak. So please just come in, bring your coffee. This is supposed to be a very rich discussion on current events that are happening between Mexico and the US, or Mexico and Texas, regarding the 1944 treaty and Mexico water deliveries to the US. So this is an important, sensitive topic. And for that, we decided that we should talk about this. We as the forum are the platform, are the space for this, to actually bring it up and talk about this and see what we can actually do about it, or what we can actually think about doing. So thank you everyone for joining us today. I want to introduce my co-host today. I'm Rosario Sanchez, by the way. I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself. I lead the effort along with the Executive Committee of the Permanent Forum of Binational Waters. And here they are all in, and especially Samuel, who's part of the panel, or the guests for today. So my co-host today is Dr. Gabriel Eckstein, Texas A&M School of Law. He's an expert on transboundary river and aquifer basins around the world. So I thought of him as the perfect fit to help us guide the discussion with our guests. So I'm not gonna go to more instructions. Let's just move forward to our guests for today. We're pretty excited of our guests that we have today. They are all part of the forum, so I thank you, all of you, for agreeing to serve and to be part of this effort. Ladies first, Luz Maria Fabiola. Luzma, I'm sorry. I thought it was a short for Luz Maria.
No,
so, thank you, Luz Maria. I'm sorry. Luzma Fabiola Nava has been mandated by the National Council of Science and Technology, CONACYT, as we all know as CONACYT, at the Center for Global Change and Sustainability in Mexico. Her primary research interests include the study of transboundary water resources management and governance, sustainable development practices, stakeholders' interests and perceptions. Thank you, Luzma, for being with us today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Our second guest today, who is also the Associate Director of this forum, is Samuel Sandoval Solís. He's an Assistant Professor in Water Resources Management at the University of California, Davis. He is responsible for the Water Management and Policy Research Program. He has explored strategies to improve the water management for human and environmental requirements. Sam also has focused his research programs in the transboundary basins of the Rio Grande Bravo, Colorado River, and the state of California. So thank you, Sam, for being with us today. And I'm going to pass now the microphone, if there is a microphone, to my co-host, Gabriel Eckstein.
Thank you. And let me just ask, Sam, I think you're sharing your screen. Or somebody's sharing their screen, if they can stop. Perfect. So the other guests that we have, our speakers here, are Mario Lopez Perez, who's a senior water resource consultant with more than 40 years experience in the Mexican and international water sector. He has experience more than 10 years on world transboundary water issues, especially in the U.S.-Mexico water region, and working on the treaties between U.S.-Mexico and transboundary groundwater resources, while working as the Mexican governmental focal point on this issue. And recently, he was working with the World Bank in the Middle East, North Africa region. He's working with UNCCD, GWP, Central America, and World Wildlife Fund Peru on drought policies, drought and floods integrated management, e-flows, water research, and groundwater recharge. So welcome, Mario Lopez Perez. And last but not least, we have Carlos Rubenstein with us. He is the principal member of RSA H2O LLC, which is an environmental consulting firm with strong emphasis on water issues. Mr. Rubenstein serves as chairman of the Texas Water Development Board from 2013 to 2015, was a commissioner of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality from 2009 to 2013. And they also served as deputy executive director of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality and as the Rio Grande Water Master. He's a former city manager for the city of Brownsville and the Texas representative to the Western States Water Council and the Board of Governors Conference Sustainable Development Work Table. So welcome, Carlos Rubenstein.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, our guests. For the audience, the guests and ourselves, we all have the same background. So you should be able to identify us easily who's talking. So now that we have completed our introductions, I would like to begin our conversation today by asking you the following question. Please remember just to keep your answers within the 2-minute range so we can cover, and we'll let the audience to speak out too and have questions. So how would you describe the current situation between Mexico and the US regarding water deliveries under the 1944 treaty? And I'm going to start with Luzma first, if that is okay with you.
Yes, thank you. The current situation between Mexico and the United States regarding water deliveries under the 1944 treaty reflects how these countries have been managing an issue related to a set of complex changes as climate, hydrology, demographics, economic, agricultural production, and politics. This current situation is anything else but an issue that needs to be addressed by diplomatic means and technical and specialized assistance. It would be or help the integration of a large number of stakeholders from different sectors collaborating in paving the way in the Rio Grande Rio Bravo Basin to see it as an entry point to binational water diplomacy or binational hydro diplomacy between the riverine countries. An enormous generation of political will is needed, along with a sustained dialogue on those socio-environmental issues that are endangering national safety and water, energy, and food, individual and national securities.
Okay, who wants to continue after this? Samuel?
How I see the current situation is I don't think that by only being if we just consider Mother Nature and how Mother Nature is going to bring water into the system, it's not going to help for Mexico to deliver the water to the United States. And it is also not going to help the farmers, the water users of Mexico in the lower portion of the basin. So what I'm seeing is that it is very unlikely to happen given natural conditions. This is nothing that is new. We were seeing some of the same, I'm not sure if it is some of the same events that we have seen in other cycles. And to me, what Luzma is saying is that we need to have improved diplomacy. We need to start thinking how to avoid some of these issues and to be prevented. So the situation is not that good. Yeah, we're gonna need more help than what Mother Nature can give us.
Who wants to jump in? Mario, Carlos? Mario, you're muted.
Yeah, unless Mario wants to speak first, I'm happy to take it on.
No. Be my guest, Carlos. We're friends.
Well, I think it's like that old song, the more things change, the more things stay the same. The situation, if it catches anybody by surprise, then they haven't been paying attention to the situation over the last 20, 30 years or longer. The reality is that we have a treaty that addresses 2 rivers and commitments from both countries. And on one hand, you have cooperation in the Colorado Basin, and you have treaty deliveries that are treated as a primary set aside for compliance, and a relatively good track record on compliance on deliveries. On the Rio Grande itself, unfortunately, we've seen this situation before, where the deliveries to the United States by Mexico are not necessarily treated as a priority in allocations. We've seen it before. It's not a surprise. There is in my opinion, an over reliance on weather patterns towards the end of a cycle to try to resolve issues. As Samuel aptly stated, that is a recipe for failure. And there have been fits and starts to try to be proactive, some of which were very successful, in trying to mitigate these impacts going forward. But for one reason or another, those seem to have gone by the wayside from time to time. Harsh positions are taken from both sides that actually get in the way towards what should be an amicable resolution. Mario?
I fully endorse on what Luzma, Samuel, and Carlos are saying, but maybe my words will not be very well welcomed by those people who might be uncomfortable on what I'm going to say. And that's what my thinking is. There is a great concern in many professionals like me, like all of you, about the high probability of non-compliance in the water deliveries, unless Mother Nature says Mexico. That's the truth. This is the current situation. There is also frustration, given that there was a joint plan agreed with Texas and the US federal government in 2014 to no longer incur in these situations. There's a great frustration. In 2014-15, the Bravo Dam system had enough water, and it was planned to increase deliveries to compensate for the delay in the initial 2 years of drought that Mexico had. Also, we have an ongoing, long, and sensitive process of agreement with the water users and states within the Basin Council, with the goal to regulate the water allocation, similar to what we did in Lerma Chapala. Also, there is a huge disappointment and anger of most of the stakeholders on the Mexican side and the US side because, of the lousy performance of the Mexican officials in charge, putting at risk the life of many farmers, both sides, as well as throwing away a long-time built US-Mexico relationship and trust. But also there is hope. I think there is hope for the possibility to put aside these guys who put Mexico in such situation and begin and agree a new process to establish a new common ground internally in Mexico and with the US in order to comply with the treaty and the Mexican farmers' productivity expectations. That's my thinking. Sorry if I'm being not very polite.
This is a coffee break, so you can do whatever you want.
Well, so let me build on this because I think we have some interesting opinions here, and I want to bring back. I can't remember who said related this to what happened in the past. This is not the first time that we've experienced this, and so I wonder, how is the situation today different than it was the last time, which was what, about 10, 12 years ago? Luzma, if we start with you, please.
Yes, thank you. Let's say that the situation has not worsened. However, it is more complex due to new developments in society, changing water availability, water demand, and water quality conditions, and poverty, and environmental degradation. This current situation also shows that both countries have not very well studied past events and have not either revisited the issue in order to recognize the need that it's time to adapt the water arrangements to make of them a more comprehensive water cooperation framework based on equity and sustainability. Let's not forget that lessons learned from past shared experience will show us the necessity for a change in transboundary policy between Mexico and the United States.
All right, thank you. Sam?
I think what is different is that, I mean, this is similar to a drought that that is coming or you are already in there, but it is a painful kind of suffering that is long lasting and so on. We know that this is happening. I think we are not that far away and things can be done still, could have been done as what Mario was mentioning. I would like to emphasize that I think it is not, for me, what is different is that currently the basin and people working in the basin they are doing their best actually to mitigate the effects. I can tell you that one. The main difference is that now we have very few people in the media or very few people doing certain unrest that they are kind of driving the conversation. I think that the other thing that I do want to emphasize is that if this goes well to the States, it will go twice as well to Mexico along the water that is divided in the border. If it doesn't go that well to the US or to Texas farmers, it will go twice as fast to the Mexican farmers. And that is something, this is not like, oh, well, we have to deliver water to the
What do you mean by that? What do you mean it'll be worse, that twice as?
So basically the water, so if it doesn't go 1 liter of water to a farmer in the States, it will not be received 2 liters of water to the farmers in Tamaulipas.
Mm-hmm.
And that is part of the rules. And the thing here is that, well, if it is in one side of the border or the other, the reality is that the fate of the farmers, the fate of the growers is tied together. And that is something that we need to see this as a shared resource. I do think that people are trying to do a good job. It is just very few that have a different opinion.
But it doesn't sound like this is very much different than what happened 10 years ago. Carlos, this is, even 10 years ago, I remember the arguments that this is such an impact on agriculture. I remember the discussions about impact on the US side, but is this any different? Have we learned anything?
I think there are differences, Gabe, unfortunately. And I think, unfortunately, because I think they get in the way for a resolution. So let's first talk about why we were successful in the past in actually resolving these issues. We were able to talk and understand on how to utilize all aspects of the treaty. Don't just read Article 4, but also read Article 9. Mm-hmm. And I think when you get people that are stuck on just reading Article 4 and want to have it applied black and white, then you end up making things difficult. And what I mean by, and then the other one is not looking for solutions on the best management of the shared resource. And what I mean by that is we have effectively in the past utilized the San Juan to resolve previous debts. And I did it when I was water master. I did it again in 2010 to 2015 before I left. Worked with Mario, worked with a lot of the people that are in viewing this today. When you take a position where certain portions of the basin that are allowed under the treaty to be utilized to find a solution, okay, going forward, and you take them out, you're actually cheating yourself from a successful way of getting things done. I think what's also missing is a discussion, which we were having back then, and I just can't tell you where it is right now because I don't know, about how do we find a model that we can agree on how we are going to be meeting conditions going forward. I also think one of the things that is different is when we solved the debt from 1992 to 2007 and then to 2012, President Fox at the time made a commitment that during his sexennial, Mexico would comply. And guess what? Mexico absolutely complied. And that's why we were able to resolve that. When you don't have the ability to do that, then you make things bad. So what I'm telling you is both sides have taken steps that in my mind are counter to finding a solution. There you have it.
And Mario, I saw you're nodding your head, agreeing with everything what Carlos was saying, no?
I endorse everything what Carlos is saying because we were partners at that time, partners in crime, we might say. Yeah. Well, in any case, 10 years ago, Mexico had neither in the dams nor a strategy to fulfill water delivery to the US. That was a truth. That's the reason why we had troubles with the 25th and 26th water cycle. Also, we had drought at that time, but the things can be resolved, as Carlos was saying. Now, even though we had a delay in the first 2 years of the 34th water cycle, because at that time we had a huge drought. Also, the US had a huge drought. If you see the North American drought monitor, say that most of the Mexican country, 85% of it, had a kind of drought. And some parts, very extreme drought, severe drought, extraordinary drought. Okay, so having said that, in the 34th cycle, with Carlos, we had a plan. Conagua had a strategy how to apply to back up the words of our president. However, what happened, we had not so much water at that time in the dams, but they were beginning to once again, for the help of the nature. We had a plan. The work in the Basin Council with all the water user representatives had a very nice progress, including the beginning of the formulation of scenarios, how to comply, the main objective, and all of them agreed upon that the first objective was to comply with the US, treating the US as the first priority in the allocation of the water. That was our main goal. As an example of that kind of agreement to honor our words, we agreed with Texas. We went directly to the state government. We bypassed, and I said, we bypassed IWC and SILA, and Carlos knows that very well. And the example was, we had a joint agreement. The US received the San Juan water in order to reduce the deliveries from Fanco Dam. The Mexican water came from excess water or excess runoff of severe storms that occurred in the upper San Juan Basin. Those deliveries were later regularized. See, Carlos and myself know that these guys, those people at IWC and SILA got upset with us because we did that. Afterwards, in the cycle 35, the Bravo Dam was almost dry. They dried up those guys. In Conagua, they dried up by managing the water system differently on what we agreed with US, with the trust of Texas and with the trust of the US government. At the end of the cycle, Mexico had no strategy. Last year, they realized they needed a plan, but it was too late. Sorry for the time.
No, so real quick, so what you're saying is today, Mexico does not have a plan.
Well, Mexico now has a plan in order to try to comply. But the thing is that they don't have the arguments, the tools to comply. And they don't have the water because they dried up the system. This is the problem. They dried up the system.
Yeah.
You can see the international farms.
Yeah, and in that one, Mario, something that I don't think the treaty is the highest priority on the basin. The treaty is a good way to make things fair between both, mostly along the border. I think the treaty is a good kind of objective that makes things super fair. The problem is that when you get this far behind in delivering water or in managing the system to fulfill this, then all of a sudden, then you are getting water or taking water from other people that they should, do not have any other water resource. I think the treaty is a good way, but I don't think it should be the main objective.
So I want to know, what is the plan, Mario, that the Mexican government has right now? Because if the system is all dried up, what's exactly the plan?
Well, they had a, well, because they messed up with the Chihuahua farmers, they lost the plan now. They don't have any plan at all. They had a plan. In December, they had a plan. And the idea is to take the water from the Chihuahua dams. But they couldn't because the farmers didn't allow it. And why they didn't? Very simple. They don't ask for that. They said, I'm the water authority. I can do what I want. I can do as I want. And I don't have to take into consideration neither the states, neither the farmers. This is not the way we proceed at that time. Carlos knows it very well. We agreed with the stakeholders. We explained them. We give them reasons. We give them justification, explanation that this was going to be different in a different way for everybody, not for only for the Mexican farmers, but also for the U.S. farmers on the Valle Bajo in Texas.
So what I'm seeing, what I'm listening, or what I'm getting out of this conversation so far is that what is the problem? I don't see the water being the problem, the weather being the problem, the interpretation of the treaty being the problem, not even the knowledge being the problem. What is it? Is it communication? Is it diplomacy, as Luzma was mentioning at the beginning? Is lack of skills of stakeholders to talk to each other and agree on a solution? Is there some, there's no communication? That's what I'm getting from Carlos, from you, from Luzma, and from Sam, actually. There's some kind of miscommunication or not communication. What is the problem? What would you say the problem is? Weather, population, all of them?
I'll go first if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yep, I think the problem is multifaceted. I think the problem, in the simplest terms, is the U.S., the commitment to deliver water to the U.S., to the Rio Grande, is not a priority for Mexico from its basin states. That's a fact, and I'm not making it up. The facts substantiate that. There is an over-reliance on the weather. That's one problem. The problem is not the treaty. The problem is a willingness to comply with the treaty. The problem is not the treaty. The problem is not having a plan to go forward. The other problem is thinking that the US can dictate to Mexico exactly where the water should come from. We would not accept Mexico telling us how to use our waters as long as it's compliant. And we need to show the exact same respect for Mexico. And to do that, you need to be in a position to look holistically at the entire basin. Yes, we have weather patterns, but guess what? The treaty was passed in '44. It's a hell of a lot older than I am. Not all that makes me feel better now. But we've had changing weather patterns, right? We've had periods of wet periods and dry periods. So we can't blame it on the weather. The period is actually relatively short. Can't blame it on climate change. Excuse me, although to a degree, I think we need to accommodate for that. There is a real problem that the population and the uses of the water have dramatically increased along the border, but they also have on the Colorado. And there's cooperation. So there's something missing here. But again, so it is either, in my mind, is on the Mexican side, is not setting aside water as a priority for delivery first, just like the US does out of the Colorado. And on the American side is thinking that we have a right to dictate to Mexico on the exact steps it needs to take to comply. And as long as you continue taking those positions, we can have another coffee 20 years from now, and we'll be talking about the same thing.
Can I step in order to endorse what Carlos is saying? That's fully true. I was also participating in the Colorado Cooperation, and I know what Carlos. There's James Harkin around, and also Gilbert Anaya, and most Ted Kowalski, and many other people who I know in the Colorado. This is the way to proceed. We need to repeat that model. But as Carlos saying, and some people say, and I also fully agree that this is an extremely complex problem right now, and in this present time. In the core, it is an over-allocation on the Mexican side, as it is in the Colorado side, in the US. It is an over-allocation. The water demands that originally was foreseen by Uribe de Alba, the top Mexican negotiator for the treaty, has doubled. And the groundwater pumping, which was not considered in this analysis, today has an impact whose indicator is the Mexican River has no base flow. At that time, they had base flow. Another component of the problem is the increasingly hydrological variability, as Carlos explained. Some say it is climate change, others say it is not climate change. We don't care if it is or not. The fact is, it's a huge variability in the system. That was not considered when the treaty was signed. And this is exacerbated by a dangerous and growing lack in exercise of water authority in Mexico, associated with an increase in water users' rebellion, because they don't want fully understand what's going to happen if Mexico doesn't comply with the treaty. They don't care because we have not explained them. And also, there's a politicization in the issue. What is happening right now in Chihuahua, it is not the best governance example. There is also the problem of communication, as I said, tied with a wrong interpretation of the treaty. It is done on purpose, but we don't know yet. Concept information on how the treaty should be read, as well as the progress in compliance with the treaty, are not fully or untimely transmitted. The distortion creates confusion among those who think they know, or they think they are experts, and they explain the things differently, assuming wrong interpretations. That's my thanks.
Samuel?
For me, something that I was thinking in what is the problem. So for the last 2 years, I've been working super close with the Basin Council, and I can assure you that they've been doing some steps to try to make it happen. We have had some meetings to do this. I would say that, again, at least on the Mexican side, they've been trying to do their way or to make a good job on it. I do think that they've been trying to set these rules to actually see how Mexico is going to operate the basin. So I think there has been, at least from the stakeholders, I can see that there has been some good motivation, some good ideas. I do also think so. That is one part, the stakeholders. The agency, I think at some point it has, and this can be or even the president or someone at the federal level, that they receive a pressure from farmers in Chihuahua, and then things get more than in the looking at what can be done for all the farmers as the entire basin, considering Mexico and US. It has been just driven by one group of farmers versus the rest. And the reality there is that has been true, because it wasn't that they were not thinking ahead. I think they were thinking ahead. The problem has been, or what I have seen, that how we have got here is very few trying to hold it. In the longer term, I do think that, we've been working in some of those regulations for 15 years. I always tell them that we need to do the quinceañera party to some of these regulations. But I do think that once they are done, once they are rules, and again, 85% of the stakeholders, they are in favor. I can see that. The problem is that we have the few. It's similar sometimes, like the US. I do it because I can. Is the loud or the voice of the louder. Anyway, Luzma.
Yes, thank you. If I had to answer this question in no more than 2 words, I will say that the problem is change, but also the problem is non-change. Ongoing change in the region provide a unique opportunity to update the terms of the treaty to the current and future conditions. This region is rich on human and technical capital to make the necessary studies and projections to visualize how climate is affecting and will affect water conditions. Also, in this region, we also find a great number of specialists willing to transfer knowledge to decision makers. However, change is not only about climate, it is also about population growth, agricultural production, economic development, international trade, biophysical processes, and safety and risk prevention. Nevertheless, the problem about change is very simple. The treaty has not evolved in tandem with all the change affecting the region. And also, the treaty has not progressed at the same rate or at the same rhythm as the production of knowledge and science. I also mentioned that the problem is non-change. And in this case, the problem consists in the preference to uphold the status quo in order to avoid any modification of structures that sustain the water binational relation despite all change in the social, economic, and biophysical domains. That's my answer.
So Luzma, let me jump in here, because something you said I thought is particularly interesting, that you said that the treaty has not adapted. And it sounds like you're saying that the treaty needs to undergo some changes, but I recall also that Carlos said that the treaty is not the problem. So I just wonder, what do you think is, I mean, do we need to revise the treaty? Do we need to change it completely, start from scratch? I mean, what do we, and in what way?
No, the treaty is a very good treaty between countries sharing water resources by national or transboundary at a transboundary level. But what we need to take a look and to see if this is still a good idea is about the amount of water that we are sharing despite all these changes that we are living right now. So
when you say when you say the amount of water, you mean how we allocate it, or do you think that there's
the quantity of water that has to be delivered to the US and the quantity of water that has to be delivered to Mexico? As Carlos just mentioned, the treaty is ordered from 1944, and at that time we hadn't had the same quantity or the same number of people living in the basin. We didn't have the same kind of economic activity, and we didn't have the same environmental conditions. And on the top of that, we didn't even think about climate change. And now climate change is affecting water availability in terms of quantity and quality terms.
Great. So Carlos, let me throw that at you then, because you said earlier that the treaty is not the problem, but Luzma says that the treaty is outdated. And it needs to be modernized. What do you think?
I didn't exactly hear it that way from her.
Okay.
And so I'll come to her defense. The treaty is not the problem. The problem is a lack of willingness and ability to comply. So if we can't comply with this one, what makes you think we'll comply with a different one? Now, I will tell you what, and the treaty has changed. We have minute orders that help us interpret the treaty. And so I think there's an ability to do that. I think the one thing that needs to change is that we do not have people on both sides selectively reading the treaty. Read the whole darn thing and empower the people that are sitting across the table, just like we did, and we were empowered back then, to apply the entire treaty. You know, to be able to say, I may not be able to do this in Article 4, but I absolutely can do it under Article 9.
And just for clarification, 4, you're talking about the Rio Grande, and 9, you're talking about is it Colorado?
No, the 9, I'm talking about power given to IBWC and CLA for the utilization of all binational waters. So that is where you have the commissioner of IBWC absolutely has the authority to look at the San Juan, and we have utilized that in the past. But when you only want to read Article 4, and you want to ignore Article 9, it isn't a problem with the treaty anymore, is it? Because the treaty has worked before. We have found solutions, and what we did back to resolve the 1992 to 2012 period, and what we did in the early teens, 2013 through 15. You know what it was? It was by finding solutions to not only the problem that was facing us, but to proactively prevent it going forward. That's what we need to get back to.
And,
so
and you know, I do
Sam.
want to highlight on that one, because so if we go to Article 9, so we are in crisis mode. We are already in trouble, and now we want to backpedaling, we're not going anywhere. Here, I think what, so the first thing is, how can we prevent this? Climate is changing, we have more water users than we should have. Politics have changed, and also the demographics, the economy there. I do think that before, the treaty, I don't think it has to be rewritten or so. What I do think is that it is a good excuse for bringing us together. It is a good excuse to think of a management within Mexico, within the international dams, also for the lower Rio Grande, Bajo Rio Bravo. That is a good excuse. I think if we're going there, if the treaty is a good excuse, it shouldn't be rewritten. It is a super good excuse for bringing us together, and we should not go into Article 9 as we are trying to think right now, because that we have gone so far. I think we can prevent it, and I've seen that there are strategies, or there are efforts to prevent it. It hasn't been passed. What I was telling you, it's been 15 years since some of those have been working on there. I do hope that we can get an agreement there.
Okay. And Mario, what do you think about the value of the treaty in its current form, or if it needs to be amended?
There is two answers to your question. The first answer is no. It is no point of analyzing, even touching right now the treaty, because today it would be politicized and a conflict between the two countries. You need to remember that both countries, Mexico and the US, will be in an electoral process in a few months. So the water issue can be the new arena for internal and external conflict. That's a point that should be considered right now. On the other side, the best example treaty works is what we have done in the Colorado River. The process of cooperation where we didn't change a letter, we found out ways how to solve things with imagination. New water creation, we realize that, and water, saving water for Mexico on the US side, following on the Mexican side, that kind of thing gives you enough room to do the same in the Bravo. So a revision of the hydrology in order to find out if under the present conditions, is it feasible to comply? It is as a matter of research. That's what my thinking is. The fact is what Carlos has been said. It is a matter of willingness to comply. It takes the technology on both sides in order to reduce the amount of water that we need, with having this more productivity, which is the end of what the farmers are trying to do. They don't care if they use 1 liter of water to produce a ton of crops. The end of their economic life is win money and to have a better status of life. And that can be achieved with the technology that we do have. It is a matter of trying to comply. I think there is enough water. There are other means. In the Colorado, we envisioned the use of desalination to cope with one part of the water supply. We can do the same thing here. We don't need to change the treaty.
Okay, let me just kind of wrap up what I am getting right now. So the problem seems to be willingness to comply. Now, why? I mean, why wouldn't Mexico want it to comply? I mean, because the way I see it, and as Samuel was mentioning, whatever you do downstream to Texas, it also affects Mexico downstream. So why would you not want to comply with the treaty, whatever amount we agree on, right? Or whatever way we agree on to pay whatever I meant Mexico or the US. It is a matter of sitting at the table and agree on a solution, right? That's all it takes to comply with the treaty. This is the way I understand it. to find solutions that might not be written in the treaty, but as long as you both, Mexico, US, agree, they're good to go. This is what you did 15 years ago. So why is it right now we don't see that window of opportunity, or why would you think there's no willingness to comply? If in the Mexico side, you're affecting equally Mexico, northern Mexico and Texas.
I'll take a shot at it first. I think
Okay.
I think part of the issue is the socioeconomic and political implications on state by states for Mexico. We have to recognize that they are different. And it shouldn't be todos hijos de Dios o todos hijos del diablo, right? But it is what it is. And that gets in the way of the ability to comply. So if you back off because of political pressure, that is, you have the willingness to comply, but up to a certain degree, then you really don't have a willingness to comply, right? Okay. And so I think that that's part of the issue. And I think the other one is, on our side, is a willingness to be flexible in how we comply. If you owe me money, as long as you're not giving me stolen money and you're paying me back, then let's find a way to work this out. It should be the same for water, right? Now I'll tell you, we can learn from the past. The way we solved, it was in February of 2005. Mario, you were there. And if Sally Spooner is watching this, she was there too. We all huddled together. People from SILA, people from CONAGUA, people from IBWC, the Water Master's office. We huddled together in the IBWC El Paso office. And we said, okay, here's how much water is owed, 717,000 acre feet. Mexico, what are you willing to do? We actually literally created a spreadsheet on the fly. So we plugged in numbers. And when we plugged in those numbers, we realized if we gave a little here, we could get more here. And there would be a social economic benefit through the entire basin. And within a period of 45 minutes, we had a deal that both presidents were able to announce a month later. That institutional knowledge, that commitment to cooperatively work together is needed. That's my 2 cents.
You know,
institutional knowledge. Sam?
You know what, in that one, Rosario, so I can see this in 2 different ways. Kind of the law and order, which is kind of coming from the federals and saying what to do. But then the problem there is that not considering the users there. And something that I'm seeing here is that I think, I mean, at this moment, we need to use different strategies to be more specific. I do think that so the willingness to comply, it has gone in how can we change the livelihood of farmers, of the people using the water, changing the perspective that this is, if it was for technology, I think we can figure that out. I think we need to work with the communities, with the farmers, with the stakeholders, change the mindset. I do think that they realize that if it goes bad to the US, it will go twice as bad to their fellow farmers in Tamaulipas. I do think that they realize it, not all of them. And I think that to me, that's what I've been the problem in the willingness to comply is sometimes the reluctancy of certain groups not to comply with. I do think that this should not be just seen as well, you know, if we can apply the law and we can do it again, because that's what it happened in the last drought and so on. And this is a very top-down, let me tell you what we're going to do. This is how we solve it. But we forget the real issues, which are not only the farmers, the cities, the understanding of the basin, realizing that the fate of Mexican farmers is super tied to the fate of Texans and vice versa. I do think that that's looking this more than a mathematical and arithmetic solution, that there is more behind it. I think that's why it has been so difficult to comply, or the willingness to comply. Luzma?
Luzma?
Yes, I think that as I think Mario and Carlos already mentioned, within the basin there are a set of stakeholders. There are plenty of stakeholders, and all of them, they are very, very different one each other. So the issue might rely on the fact of all of them, they have competing or concurrent or complementary interests, and so the issue, the challenge is how you put together all of those interests within one common purpose. That's the issue.
Okay. Gabriel, why don't we start?
Can I talk a bit on that?
Yes, Mario, please.
Well, why Mexico does not comply? This is the question. Why is the willingness not to comply? If the Mexican federal authorities continue to handle the situation as right now, Mexico will not comply. That's for sure. Because they are not handling the situation correctly. They are not approaching in a manner with the Basin Council, with the stakeholders, with the states, and even with the US. They are not doing the things. Mexico has not many options to comply if they continue to do their ways. They need to go back to the original plan if they want to comply in the near future. And that means they need, that's my thinking, that's my idea, that's my proposal, not anybody else's proposal. They need to deliver the remaining water to the US of this cycle and fully compensate the farmers for the next agricultural cycle. They need to apply following, as we had in the Colorado. No other option.
Do we have the water for that? I mean, I don't know.
I mean, the water of the next hydrological cycle. Mm-hmm. We have had that when we wanted to comply because of the lack of delivering in the cycle 25th and 26th. Mexico didn't grow crops because we had to comply. We need to be on track once again. This is the only option right now, unless Mother Nature says every other thing. We need I think that the best and the only option is to go back to the original plan of 2014. If we don't want to get back to this same issue by the end of the next cycle. But we have to be very cautious. It is a social process. We need to restore trust among the basin councils, the Mexican users, and with the US. That is a fact. It is not rebuilding a wrecked car. It is a social process. There are humans. To initiate, we need to process once again, begin investing, modernizing, resizing the agricultural areas of the 6 tributaries and also below Falcon Dam. What Samuel said, it is a fact. It is not point of delivering 1/3 to the US and 2/3 because we have to comply with Tamaulipas. It is useless. We're wasting water in the process from Chihuahua down to Tamaulipas. We are losing 60% of that water. It is idle to do that. We need to establish monitoring and surveillance systems with participation of the states and the Basin Council. Conagua by itself can't. That's a fact as well. We need to agree on a new regulatory process that we had at that time with +2 minus 10% of the average annual deliveries. We need to comply with that. Otherwise, we will get once again in troubles when we have no water in order to deliver to the US. We need to establish incentives to the farmers, incentives to say so. You will not lose your right. You need to improve yourself, and I will incentivize you. You will have the water, yes, but maybe not today. You will lose it next year. We need to find out solutions on the Mexican side. We need to implement a groundwater recharge program on the entire basin. Samuel knows that. We need to use the maximum recharge strategy that WWF Mexico has. We need to rely on nature-based solutions. We need to legally protect and restore the original recharge zones and its land use. We need to go back to nature in order to produce more water. We need to do the things differently and not to do the things that today the Mexican federal authorities are handling the situation. That's my thinking.
We're sorry, if maybe we should move to some of the questions because we have some questions in the chat. And I want to maybe start off with indirectly related to what Mario was just saying, because in terms of how the federal authorities are taking action here. But then you also mentioned the basin councils and the participants on the ground. And I want to ask everybody, and maybe we'll start with Luzma. I mean, what is the role of stakeholders? What is the role of farmers or farmer councils or the irrigation districts in managing this treaty, in managing allocations, in meeting the allocations? And do they have the information that they need? Is there transparency in terms of the information that is being collected, whether through CONAGUA, IBWC, USGS, and so on? So what do you think is the role and the opportunities for stakeholders?
Yes, I will answer this question thinking about the question number 5 that we had. About that, I was about to say that a set of other options requires participation of the organized society and all of the stakeholders involved in order to give a sense. You listen to me, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. In order to give a sense to the current situation. In this case, actions and decisions taken at the bottom level could help the transformative process which will need to be ratified at the top level. Here, it is important to highlight the role of socio-environmental groups and associations speaking on behalf of the environment and asking for preservation and restoration projects. It is also important to mention that this transformative process requires individual will and personal insights in order to modify our relation with water resources and the environment, and to decide what are we protecting and what are we securing for the future. And finally, it goes without saying that the agricultural sector needs to modernize its processes. And for this sector requires immediate technical and technological capacity, but most importantly, financial and economic support. In this case, the respective authorities and the farmers are both responsible for building mutual trust and a shared sense of purpose. That's my thinking.
Okay. Carlos, what do you think? Where do stakeholders fit in this? The folks on the ground.
I think if you want a great recipe for failure is don't include stakeholders. It's just that simple on either side. But I think the role is where what the question should be. Should stakeholders be involved or not? Absolutely, they should be involved. They should be well informed and it should be transparent. And you should be very clear about the ups and the downs of the political or policy decision that the decision makers are making. Stakeholders are not the decision makers, but they can inform and instruct that process. So you need to be open to that. I think you need to be very careful that whatever you consider to be your stakeholder universe, that it really truly represents that universe. Because if you think you are hearing from a municipal interest or an irrigation interest, speaking, let's just pick the Texas side, speaking clearly just from the lower valley, they're giving you their opinion from where they are on the basin. They cannot be speaking on behalf of all of their corresponding interests, similar interests up and down that river because the conditions are different and regulatory processes mandate the equitable distribution of that water. And if you don't start out with those issues and guidelines, then you are cheating yourself of an effective stakeholder process. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Mario or Sam?
Well, what can I say is that having the experience of working with many basin councils in Mexico, creating them, understanding the thinking of the water users, particularly the farmers, I fully endorse what Carlos is saying. The people from Chihuahua do not have the same vision as the people from Tamaulipas. They share different visions. They share different interests. This is a big basin council, very large one. The amount of water that is being produced upstream, it is different than the water that it is needed downstream. The opinion of the representatives of the stakeholders at the basin council level, most of the time, it is not the opinion of their other people that they are representing, because they don't get the information that it is being delivered in the basin council. That is a problem that today the basin councils do have. Many times the representatives do not share the information that they receive. They do not share the recommendations. And this is a problem directly related in the interpretation of the treaty. The people that participate at the basin council level, they do understand, they participate. They interpret correctly what it has been written in the water treaty. But when you go to the people they represent, they don't have the same information. They don't share the same ideas. This is a problem. And we need to find out a solution how to solve it. But it is a matter of willingness to get that information to those people on the ground, as you say. We need to find out ways to do that.
Yeah, I would like to go back to one of the questions from Laura. So if 85% of the stakeholders in the Rio Bravo Basin Council agree with the new regulation that comply with the treaty, why Conagua hasn't passed that regulation that has been developed for the past 15 years? And I think I would like to go to that question because of the following. The Rio Bravo Basin Council, I can tell you, is the most sophisticated in Mexico, and it certainly might be the most sophisticated in the basin. It does have a lot of good understanding, technical understanding. Most of them, they agree, and they agree or they have agreed. To me, this is kind of like when you're engaged for 15 years and when you're in front of the altar, many times people have backed up. And that has been super, in my case, super sad. That's the regulation that we're talking. I can tell you that as you're including stakeholders, unfortunately, what Mario, Carlos are saying is correct. They don't have the same vision. They are seeing their portion of the basin. It looks super good in a model. It looks super good in some of the plans. But when it actually comes the time to say, okay, we're really implementing this, and the change that Luzma was saying, we're going to change the way that we have operated traditionally. Now we want to change, and it can be a baby step. The no action for some is a very good action. Having the status quo and still, again, what I was telling you, I do it because I can. When you are in those meetings, you realize that there is very good willingness. There is the realization that we can no longer be like this. But when it comes to actually to kind of moving forward, oh man, you try to kind of make walk a donkey, when it doesn't want to walk, and that has been, and again, it's not all of them. For me, what I have seen it is that it has been the voice of the power of few, because the reality is that there are many people that want to make this clear to prevent what we're having right now, which is to do not comply for the treaty. I think we should include the stakeholders. I do think that this has been at some point when it has to the change, people are super reluctant, and they empower with the rhetoric, with the speeches of, no, we're not going to change, no, we're not going to move a drop of water out of here, and so on. I don't know. That's what I've seen.
Unless you give them incentives, unless you give them something to change, then you need to motivate for the change.
And I'm going to jump just right there, Mario, because I have a question related to that. So, and it's actually to you. What would those incentives to Mexican farmers look like? What will be a realistic incentive?
A realistic incentive is what I said to you. The farmers, they look for the money. They don't care about the resources. How do they get that money from? The possibility that I think it is feasible, and I'm working on this in other part of Mexico, in Zacatecas, is you help them to do the savings. They care, say, please do not move what I have been allocated according to my water right. Don't touch it, because they think it is an asset for them. The situation is, okay, you reduce the amount of water that you do, but the federal authority do not reduce the water right. The difference is being put in a bank, in a water reserve, and that water reserve can be used in the future. It is just like the same idea of what we have in building new water savings in the Colorado River. This is a way how to imaginatively create water in a bank that can be used in the future. It is the same idea. They are saving water. They are earning money because the productivity is increased. They don't lose the water. They can use that water in the near future. And they conserve agriculture. They continue to be farmers, because you may know that most of the farmers are getting old, and they are renting the land. So this is also a thing that has to be solved and considered in the negotiation with them. You will not rent, you will continue to be farmer, you will reduce the amount of water, and what I give you is investment, and you will not lose your water right.
So let me jump in here, Carlos, or maybe Luzma. I mean, would it make sense that the U.S. should help in these kinds of incentives?
No.
No?
No, and I'll tell you why. And it is a biased opinion. History, we need to change history. If we're going to talk about change, we need to change the history. We tried this once, minute 309. All right? There was a commitment to invest retained earnings from NatBank in Mexico and in the US. And the water that was to be conserved in Chihuahua was supposed to be dedicated for and allocated for treaty compliance. Sounds awesome. Money flowed. Projects were developed. Water did not necessarily continue to flow. So until you have and I'm sorry, in this case, history shows you, again, going back to my point, it's the willingness to actually honor the bargain you're entering into.
But is minute 318 any different than 309? I mean, minute 318 seemed to, the investment in or was it 17, the investment in Mexicali.
It is minute 319.
319.
19 in Mexicali.
It's a little different. I mean, there was an investment to retain water in the US lakes, right? The ability to forego and retain your ability to call for the water going forward.
No, but you had American investors helping to repair the infrastructure.
That's correct, because because by repairing those issues there, then you were increasing the efficiency that otherwise needed to be met by increased releases in the delivery of Mexico's water. It was not US water, but it was Mexico's water. And Mexico could then also benefit by having conserved that water in the lakes in the United States for future use. In this instance, the difference here is and I'm telling you as a Texan that saw this happen then and lived it, we invested to buy water that was owed to us. And regrettably, the history on compliance with minute 309 is not one I bank on.
The difference, backing up what Carlos saying, the difference between minute 319 and 309 is that US is investing in Mexico, but the control of the water is in the US, not in Mexico. So Mexico has the incentive to comply because the water is not being delivered to Mexico. That's a difference. In the case of Chihuahua, minute 309, Mexico had the control and didn't want to comply. And they didn't comply. The investments were made. Yes, that water use the depth of the 25th and 26th water cycle. In the 27th water cycle, that happened. But after that, as Carlos was saying, that amount of water that has been saved with this infrastructure modernization is been stuck in Mexico. Mexico has not used that water to deliver, to smooth the deliveries to the US. But having said that, I still think it is working. It should work with certain corrections and modifications to minute 309. And the modification would be, that's my thinking. Maybe you will not agree on that.
Let me ask Luzma about.
I would agree with a clawback provision. In other words, if we invest, right? And look, I do not have authority to speak for any government because I'm a private.
Neither do I, Carlos. Neither do I. This is the coffee.
But that's right. But let's face it, we lived this for a long time. So
yes, we did.
We have license to speak.
License to kill as well.
That's good. I think if you're going to do this going forward, then have a clawback provision. Whereas if the U.S. invests in modernization in Mexico, it should invest an equal amount, if not more, in the U.S. as well, because there's benefits to be gained there too, to promote conservation. But if Mexico again fails to comply like it did in 309, then have a clawback where the money has to be repaid with a substantial penalty. Because, I'm sorry, 309 taught us one thing: you cannot trust.
And for that one, I do think
that's my point, building trust once again. But what if the assurance for complying is the water that is in the international dams? Yeah. What if the assurance is in the building the third international dam that it is been written in the treaty? So
for me,
there are other options. There are other options.
I don't like, I don't like people that, or I don't like to pay farmers for water. And the reality there is that you just enable them. And also specifically for this case, it will be a way to, if you pay them, to some people actually will keep them as farmers and they will put water. But to a second class farmers, you're just gonna give them money. And whenever we're in trouble, don't worry, we're gonna pay you. And I think you're treating the same farmers in a different way. And personally, I don't think about that one. The other one is that, so we already know that so you're giving persons that already have a problem in an economic debt, you're giving it an extra credit card or a way to spend more money. If you're giving farmers that are already oversized, put it some in efficiency so they can continue growing, oh man, I don't want to go there. That will be my side. Luzma?
I think that
if you consider,
let Luzma, please.
Yeah, thank you. I think that you are right. We cannot change history, but we must learn from it, right? And we must learn also from other experiences. resources. And the idea of water banks, to develop a water bank within the Mexican part of the basin, is a very good one. And also, it is an idea, it is something that is already going on within the basin, but in New Mexico. So why we don't learn from a water bank within the Mexican River Basin? And in this way, we can help the farmers, and we can help the environment, and we can help each other. That would be a great idea, if this idea is really taken within the Consul Basin.
Can I say something?
Yeah, one last thing, please. Yes.
Okay. The US investing, they are not investing in the farmers. They are investing in the infrastructure of the federal government. So who is responsible for paying that water is the Mexican government. And that means the federal government should comply. And the only way that the Mexican federal can comply is that putting their water at risk. And the water is in the international dams. In Falcon Dam, in Amistad Dam, building in the third dam. This is the way I think it could be possible. Mexico would be in a tight shirt to comply.
All right, thank you. So we're almost at the end of our time here. And so what I'd like to do is just very briefly wrap up a little bit on some points that I think we have agreement on. I have to say, for the most part, you were a fairly agreeable panel. And I think that there's points here that that we seem to have common interests or common ideas on. So let me just maybe highlight a few of these points that I think that where I think that we see some commonalities, and then later we'll give you time for a really quick final comment at the end. So first of all, on the 1944 treaty, I think there's a sense that you all think it still works, and there's still value in the treaty, and that maybe we don't even need to modify it. Maybe we need to have interpretations or something to bring in some of the changes that have occurred over the time into those interpretations. But generally, that the treaty still seems to work, and it certainly works on the Colorado. But we now need to really ratchet it up and make it work better on the Rio Grande. Seems to be quite a good agreement that on the Rio Grande, we need both sides to prioritize the treaty itself and to prioritize compliance with the treaty. And maybe this is not as always has happened in the past. And this is something that we need to have as we move forward. Need to expand cooperation and exchange information. And then I heard a number of you talking about to be creative and to be flexible in terms of how we cooperate and how we kind of develop solutions still based on the structure that we have from the treaty. So Rosario, if you have any other kinds of commonalities or agreements that you wanted to identify?
Yes. Something important here is the trust. I've heard you mention that a couple of times, and it's like the other side of the coin, right? The willingness to comply, and then on the other side there's a trust or distrust, I would say, and that's something that is not just necessarily water related. It might be just politically related, social, historical related, any other issues that usually are just in this time of the year or after 5 years, we end up facing these troubles in the border with water, just because there's not enough trust in our communication, and not just binationally speaking. I think this is true also at domestic level. And I believe Mario mentioned that, and Samuel mentioned that. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's not even communication within the same country. I mean, the states are holded as separate entities, and they don't seem to be talking to each other. So that, of course, that is going to affect at binational level. So it's not a one end question or answer at this point. So we also talk about incentives, whatever they are, to improve not just the compliance, but also, you know, the water conditions in the basin. I mean, we need to start working on water conservation, environmental flows, all some of the Luzma's points as well. We need to start thinking bigger. I mean, not just we need to comply with this amount of water every year. I mean, we need to comply with lots more water for the environment, for population growth, for, you know, we need to produce water. And you mentioned that, Mario, at some point. We need to start thinking about producing water, not just the compliance, but to go beyond the compliance, because that's what the basin requires. I mean, that's the bigger challenge. And we're not even close to compliance because we're not seeing the big picture, I guess. That's from my end. Those are my final wrap up, and I'll give you guys 1 minute talk if you want to give your last comments on this. If you go ahead, Sam.
You know, yeah, just to add on what you're saying, I do think the other commonality, or what I'm seeing, is that, yeah, the fate of Mexico is tied to the fate of the U.S., and the fate of the U.S. is tied to the operations in Mexico, and that is super uncomfortable. We just need to realize that we're asking water to the desert, that we are sharing resources, that yeah, I think we just need to realize that it is just one river, and that we need to rather than being here and once again have these conversations, how to be preventive. I do think that we can be preventive, and that's what I'm seeing, that we're working. We need to work a little bit more, and that will be my comment.
I would like also to add to what Sam you said, that I think we all stakeholders need to make the difference between the ownership and the sense of belonging. It's not exactly the same thing. So if I own the water, as Sam said, I do what I want because it is my water and I own it. But if I do belong to the basin, then I do care of what is happening upstream, downstream, and within my area. So that's a very small comment, but I think it's very, very important within this basin. Thank you.
Mario or Carlos, whoever wants to. Mario?
Yes.
Your last comment?
In the Colorado River Basin process, I said it many times. We are roommates. That it is a better understanding how to do the things. And as a roommate, we need to have trust. We need to trust each other because we are sharing many things together. We're sharing the same room, the same bathroom, the same kitchen, everything. Having said that, everything is related to rebuild the trust, to rebuild the relationship that we lost, and resume the original strategy and updating it. We need to rebuild the trust with the Mexican water users. We have disrespected them. We need to rebuild trust in the Basin Council. We disrespected them. We need to rebuild the trust with the US and the Texas governments regarding the treaty. But let's not forget, it is a social process. What you're dealing, and this takes time. All is about trust and honor of written and spoken words. This is a takeaway message by myself.
Thank you,
I'll close out with this, and I really appreciate the comment from Laura. 77, 78
Yes.
people on this chat, amazing. I think we all have a role to play. You know, people came before us, and certainly people will come after us. There is a tremendous amount of institutional knowledge, not necessarily in government today, but in government and out here. And I think to the extent that we all can lend a hand and communicate our experiences, communicate ideas, you know, the pitfalls of thinking a certain way or the other to the current decision makers, I think we will better serve the basin by doing that. So my challenge to you all is, I had a blast. Let's do this again.
Great. Gabriel?
So, yeah, I was just going to say, you know, just on what Carlos was saying about Laura's comment. I mean, yeah, I think we got up to 88, 89, but more than 70 people stayed on. I mean, this tells you something, that this is something that is of importance to people, and they want to be involved. They are stakeholders. They want to participate. They want to be engaged. And so we really appreciate everybody joining us here today and participating and sharing your comments. And we were going to try, you know, we'll try to do this numerous times more. And we want to find other ways to bring in the rest of you. You know, we were looking at questions from the chat, but I want to see if we can find other ways to bring in participants to bring in their questions more directly. Maybe next time what we'll do, we can have breakout rooms and some other things, so we can have more participation from everybody. I mean, having more than 70 people continue to this is really fantastic. So thank you all for joining us. Rosario, have the last word.
The last word will be, this is not going to be the last word, of course. I mean, this is just the starting. We're just starting here. We're just warming up. So these coffee breaks will keep going with those issues that, you know, matters to all of us, to the community. I mean, I guess that's why we are all here today. I mean, this is something that matters to all of us at binational level, and we need to know from people that actually know about this and get their insights and look forward, you know, to see some of the ideas expressed here today to actually be considered at a serious level. I mean, formal level, if I may say. So I want to thank everyone for being here today. We're going to come up with more coffee breaks at least every 2 months. You'll get all the invitations. All the members of the forum are part of this. If you have questions, suggestions on topics, please email us. The email is going to appear in the chat in a bit. And please stay in touch with the Permanent Forum Binational Waters. This is your space. Use it. It's made for you and for the binational waters. So I thank you, the speakers today, our guests, not even speakers, I mean, you're a guest. Samuel, you're my left and right hand. Luzma, thank you very much. Carlos, Mario, I don't know where you are, but I know you're somewhere out there in the world doing great things.
Good job.
And of course, my co-host is the best co-host I can think of. I'm gonna hire you now.
Well, you're the one that organized this whole thing. So a big hand for Rosario for taking the lead on this whole binational waters project and for coming up with all these projects and activities and coffees and everything else. So thank you all, and thank you, Rosario.
No. Thank the executive committee. I mean, there's Sam, there's Gabi connected, Saul connected, all the permanent, the executive committee is connected and it's here. So, and my advisory committee, Carlos is in the advisory committee. So we're a team. So please thank yourselves that we are all here today and we agree on something, which is good. You know, it's conciliation points. That's what we need. Conciliate. To move
so next
forward.
time we'll have CONAGUA, the State Department,
Oh,
IBWC, and okay, good.
Definitely.
That wouldn't be that great. I mean, we're here, we're virtual. I mean, it's not like you can just, you know, mute somebody.
Hey, invite us to that party.
All right.
We
Have
will
a good
laugh
night.
lot.
Buenas noches.
Our
Have a good night,
temporary
everyone.
translation services.
Ciao.
Thank you very much for tonight.
you.
I'll
Ciao,
see
ciao.
you everybody soon. Thank you.
See you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Carrie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Adiós. Gracias. Gracias a todos.
Muchas gracias. Gracias a todos.
Should have like a music at the end or something. We need to figure out how to do that, Sam. We need to have music at the end or something.
Alfredo, gracias. Nos vemos.
Saludos, gracias.
Oye, ¿sabes qué, Rosario? Ya le voy a, ya voy a parar el recording.
Sí.
Y